Hello and welcome to Analysis with me, Jonathan Steele. As the pressure to end female genital mutilation in the UK mounts, just how prepared is Michael Gove, the Education Secretary, to support the Guardian-led campaign to end the practice by supporting the teaching of the subject in schools? Despite governmental efforts to criminalise FGM under the 1985 Act, which was upgraded by another act in 2003, the practice remains very much alive and endemic. The campaign, headed by a 17-year-old farmer, Mohammed, seeks to step up pressure on the education establishment, urging head teachers to inform pupils and parents of the horrors that FGM causes. A petition that was published online last Thursday to mark the International Day of Zero Tolerance to Female Genital Mutilation received 100,000 signatures only 24 hours after it was placed online. Yet an estimated 24,000 women and girls living in the UK have been subjected to this appalling practice. Though some may justify FGM under the claim that it is classified as a religious obligation, no holy scripture, whether Islamic, Christian or Jewish, advocates for it to be carried out, either implicitly or explicitly. Yet can the struggle to combat FGM be ended within a generation? Can the struggle be simply fought in the classroom? Or are we expected to see it extended well beyond that? And just how will ministers from the Departments of Health, Education and International Development respond to end an act that is tantamount to child abuse? Joining me in the studio are Hilary Burridge, a consultant sociologist who's currently writing a book on eradicating FGM from a UK perspective, and Sheikh Abdullah Hassan from Masjid Khadija and the Imams Against Domestic Abuse. And on Skype, we're joined by Anila Anwar, the head of projects at Roshni, a resource centre working across ethnic minorities in Scotland, who's based in Glasgow. But first, let's take a look at this VT report.
For years, campaigners have argued that the practice of female genital mutilation, or FGM, has been an underexposed problem in the UK. Now a petition launched by a 17-year-old British Muslim, Farmer Mohammed, in tandem with the Guardian newspaper, has gathered 150,000 signatures, calling on the government to do more to tackle the problem. Although FGM is a global phenomenon, it primarily occurs in Africa, with up to 140 million African women thought to have been mutilated worldwide. 98% of women in Somalia are thought to have undergone the procedure, which often leads to severe physical problems.
I underwent FGM at the age of 8. I experienced many problems when I was circumcised. I was at home in great pain and bedridden for several days due to the stitches. My legs were tied together to ensure I didn't move so the stitches would stay in place. I was unable to pass urine normally. I had to lie on my side in order to urinate. The pain continued for several months, and I also had an infection. When I was 14, I started menstruating. It was a very difficult experience, painful, and I wasn't able to have my periods normally.
In Britain, the numbers are obviously far lower, and the practice has been illegal since 1985. But there are still thought to be around 66,000 victims of FGM in England and Wales, with a further 24,000 girls believed to be at risk every year. FGM is seen in many communities as a rite of passage for a young girl's transition into womanhood. Girls are often flown out of the UK to countries like Somalia or the Gambia in order for the cutting to take place. Laws introduced in 2003 could mean a jail sentence of up to 14 years for anyone taking a girl out of the UK to be mutilated. FGM occurs in many religious settings and has been adopted by some Muslims, although it predates Islam and is not practiced by the majority of Muslims. In 2007, Ali Gomar, the former Grand Mufti of Egypt, a country where 91% of the women have been cut, condemned the practice, saying,
"Excision is a practice totally banned by Islam because of the compelling evidence of the extensive damage it causes to women's bodies and minds."
Nevertheless, FGM remains an issue that raises concern among many health experts. And with thousands of women at risk in the United Kingdom each year, it looks like cultural tradition will be taking a backseat to the protection of the physical and mental health of young girls.
Well, Hilary Burridge, let me start with you. You're writing a book on the subject. Why do people do this to young girls? What's the point?
If you ask people who were doing it, they would say they had to do it because it's preparing a girl for marriage and for the security of having a husband and somebody to look after her. It's like she just belongs, first of all, to her father and then to her husband. And she's a package that has to be dealt with, and that's why you get horrible things like forced marriage, you get early child marriage, you get bride price, all those things. So it's an economic transition, which also means that the husband may well have responsibility for looking after her parents when they're older. So there is a big rationale in economic terms, absolutely inexcusable, but it's there. On top of that, there is the control of women in general, and we all know that violence against girls and women is sadly a very common practice in many communities, and FGM is one of the worst possible ways in which you control. You remove her ability to have sexual feelings before she even knows she could have them. You make her scared of sex. You make her so that she will only have sex with her husband because she's terrified to have it anyway. You've bought her body and soul, basically. So that is what's underneath it. And stuff about purity and making her, you know, clean to be married and things like that is a rationale that is layered on top of that, rather than what I and many others believe is the real rationale.
But it's also showing how power works within the household, because mothers have had it themselves, they've gone through this practice, and yet they allow their daughters to go through it because they can't resist the husband's pressure, I suppose.
Well, they believe that their daughter won't be able to marry if she doesn't have it done, and there are many instances where that is the case. Women have refused to have it done, and engagements have been cancelled. I mean, engagements is a bit of a strange concept when you may be the third or fourth wife of a particular man. In some communities, horrendously, they experience FGM in their early teens as they start to menstruate, and then they are paraded round the village, and the men who want another wife choose the one they want from these mutilated girls. I mean, it's unspeakable. But in the tradition that they belong to, that is why. And of course, there are secret societies, the Poro, the Sandy Society, which is the women's society, secret societies where there are hierarchies in which the cutter, and for the men, the people who control that from the men's side, they never speak to each other. It's a forbidden thing.
When it was first made illegal in Britain in 1985, the Act was called the Prohibition of Female Circumcision Act. Now, some people say, oh, well, it's just the female version of male circumcision. Is any validity to that?
In almost all cases, no. There are some small exceptions to that where a very small nick is taken. Even that, for a boy or a girl, is dangerous. And we know that both boys and girls can die from infection and what have you from that. But in most cases, you've got a screaming girl who's not been anaesthetised, who's wriggling and trying desperately. You're not going to just be able to do a little nick. It becomes removing parts of her inside. And quite deliberately, quite often, the clitoris is actually pulled out and chopped off without anaesthetic and without any kind of hygiene. Beyond that, and that is type 1. Beyond that, you get to type 2, where the whole of the inside of her external genitals is removed, cut out again with, well, awful things, right? Just cut with anything. And then the third type is when they don't only cut it out, but they then sew it up, traditionally with thorns or something like that, or gut or something. Now there are, and this is very, and there is a fourth type, which is any other damage, but those are the three main types. The third type results in just the girl just having a tiny hole to menstruate and to pass water and nothing else. Surprisingly enough, she often gets really serious infections. There is a 10% chance overall, or thereabouts, that she may die almost immediately from hemorrhage and shock. And
let me bring in Sheikh Abdullah, if I may. Thank you. I mean, is there any religious justification for this under Islam?
As the report suggested that, and rightly so, that FGM, the way it's carried out in many societies at the moment, it predates Islam. So there's nothing within the religious text, the Quran, or the prophetic statements which endorses or, condones FGM. It's completely prohibited, and many jurists and classical and contemporary scholars have said that FGM is completely prohibited in Islam, and whoever does that actually can be liable. I mean, it can be imprisoned if found guilty. That's what's within the Islamic law. But I think what we need to also clarify, as the 1985, I think the law that passed, the term was used circumcision. And we know from an Islamic perspective, as well as the Judaic perspective, that circumcision for men, it's something that is a lot of men do and I said there's a religious basis on that. And also, there are some people who circumcise women, not young girls, not underage girls, as a lot of people do in many communities in our world now, which is completely wrong from Islamic perspective. But circumcision, if done under the right circumstances, and it can have even health benefits. And even in the UK, in America, and other countries, under the guise of cosmetic surgery, many women, not girls, but many women, out of their own free will, they go to clinics and they carry out these kind of surgeries, labioplasty and other sort of cosmetic surgeries. So circumcision is similar to that from the Islamic perspective. What is prohibited and disgusting behavior is, the mutilation of organs, and that's completely wrong in Islam.
But I mean, from this Imams Against Domestic Abuse, I mean, is that a very small organisation? I mean, how many imams in Britain, what percentage are really active in this front? In
terms of domestic abuse, I mean, there are a lot of imams who are engaging within this campaign now, and there are increasing number of imams getting involved. It'll take time. We're a voluntary organisation. We're not funded by any governmental bodies or any other bodies. We're voluntary, in a voluntary capacity, imams come together and they challenge some of the wrong actions of certain people within our UK society.
Well, I mean, within Britain, probably the community that is most involved would be the Somali community. I mean, are the Somali imams, any of them members of the organisation? Are you doing anything to try and bring them into it?
We are doing a lot of activities and seminars and symposium to bring more imams involved. As I said, this organisation is a voluntary organisation. So it's very, very difficult for us to, I have a full-time job and other imams have full-time jobs. So it's very difficult for us to always give time. But we are working towards in bringing more imams together. And rightly so, there are, I mean, FGM is from most of the Muslims within the UK are perhaps, a large amount are from the Indian subcontinent. As FGM is not really known in the Indian subcontinent. So what this tells us is that it's a cultural issue, a cultural phenomenon that is not really endorsed by Islam or the prophetic statements. And as the clip said, many of the scholars completely, censored and prohibited this action.
Well, let's come on to the whole issue of how we can stop it. Thank you for this explanation of what it is and what the religious justification there is, which is non-existent. And go to Glasgow, where we have Anila Anwar. I mean, Scotland seems to be acting a little bit more dramatically or robustly than England. I mean, why is that? I believe your Minister of Education in the Scottish Cabinet has already started to act with the schools. Is that right?
Yes, correct. I think as a result of a lot of campaigning.
I think have we lost Anila Anwar?
Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Yes, I asked you a question.
Yep, I heard the question. Are you ready for the response?
Yes, please, right away.
Okay. Are we okay to go ahead?
Please, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's been really interesting over the last couple of days, and we very much welcome the steps the Scottish Government has taken. The Education Minister is going to request that all head teachers within schools are educated on female genital mutilation and also educate parents on the issue. And as a charity working across Scotland with the whole range of minority ethnic communities we have here, we think education really is the key. We need to have our frontline staff and professionals 100% aware that female genital mutilation is a form of child abuse, that there are girls within Scotland who are at risk of being mutilated, and the information that they need to know to be able to pick up warning signs, indicators, and to have the confidence to go forward and then make reports. I think it needs to be really clear and kind of drawn together. What's been said by your other panellists is that it is a very sensitive issue. It's a very difficult issue to address within communities because there are many justifications given from culture, from religion, and it's a practice that's been ingrained for centuries. So it's not going to be overnight to create that cultural shift and that change in attitudes. But when individuals from practicing countries do come to Scotland, they do need to be informed of the law here. They need to be informed that it's not a practice that will be allowed, that it is punishable, a criminal offence, and that education is really the key to do that. So we very much welcome these measures. But I will say that it needs to be a multifaceted approach. So drawing on what you were just saying there with the Sheikh, we really do need religious leaders to come on board and say that Islam and other religions do say that FGM is not a requirement. We need religious leaders, not just from Somalia or other practicing communities, across the faith groups to come forward and speak out against it. And we need, I would say, more resources and funding to work at a grassroots level with the communities themselves to try and create that cultural change.
Well, you mentioned education, but what about the health departments? I mean, surely if in every doctor's surgery, and people visit the doctor very frequently, there were signs and leaflets explaining just how appalling it is and how bad it is for people's health, etc. Would that not be a way to go through the health sector, not just through education?
Yes, Jonathan, you're exactly right. That's why I'm saying it has to be multifaceted. Education is really, really important, but we have to have all of the sectors on board, from the NHS to the police, across the board. Anyone who will make face-to-face contact with members of the public needs to be made aware of female genital mutilation, the impact, the consequences, and the steps that they need to take to ensure that both children and women are kept safe.
You mentioned something about warning signs. You said people should look out for warning signs. Can you tell us what are the warning signs? How would somebody know that there's a risk of it?
Well, it's going to vary. It's going to vary from individual to individual and family to family. The first step is that you need to be made aware that female genital mutilation exists. There are 28 practicing countries across the world. You need to be made aware of which countries those are. The age group of which it's performed in, it can be from infancy up to the age of 16. And sometimes women, when they're in adults, will also have FGM performed on them for some of the reasons that Hilary was mentioning earlier, marriageability and so on. But predominantly for these health and education sectors, they need to know of the countries in which it's prevalent. So those children at risk will come from Somalia, Gambia, Egypt, as you were mentioning earlier. There are 3 of the practicing countries. They need to be made aware of how it happens. So it's not something that's going to happen on a Saturday and the child will come back to school on the Monday. So the summer holidays is a high risk factor period, and people need to be made aware of that. And the other thing is that mothers come into contact with health services on a regular basis, and if a woman has been mutilated, there's a higher chance that she's going to be under pressure to have her daughter mutilated. So that's something else that health service professionals can pick up on and keep in mind when looking out for indicators.
What would you say the warning signs are? I mean,
Well, if a little girl talks about going back home for an exciting event, then I think her teacher has to probe very carefully, and probably her teacher has to alert the safeguarding professional who's in charge of that school immediately that there may be an issue, because children get taken, as we've just heard, in the summer holidays. Also, I mean, Christmas holidays and sometimes Easter. It depends when in the country the harvest is, because the harvest usually funds the ceremony. So whenever your harvest is, in different countries, it'll be different times. If there seems to be some sort of secret party going on where a special lady is coming from somewhere else, it might even be grandma, but a special lady is coming, then you have to be worried that perhaps grandma is coming to do something that is totally illegal and must be stopped immediately. And then you have also opportunities, as I think we were hearing, to say, you know, if older brothers and sisters know, they can be quite a good source of information. If children know that they can tell their teacher they're worried for their little sister, boys and girls, it's really important it's both, because there's been quite a lot of big brothers now chipping in and trying to save their little sisters. If they know they can talk to their teacher and their teacher can help to stop this happen and then mummy and daddy won't go to prison, then that is a really, really valuable activity. So if children are looking anxious and getting withdrawn and they're talking about strange things and anxious and excited together, then you have to ask why. If you see a child that is in a classroom who can't sit down, for instance, and can't move as she was and is or anxious all the time, she's probably had it done already, and you immediately have to start thinking, A, she needs help, and B, what about her little sisters?
Well, thank you for that. I mean, we're coming to the end of the first segment of this programme. Afterwards, we're going to be talking about why is it that there are no prosecutions in Britain, in spite of the fact that 2 Acts of Parliament have been passed to make it illegal. So stay with us.